Ready for the best summer ever? ID Tech is the original and most trusted tech camp for kids, ages 7 to 17, offering over 50 epic courses like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with take-home bots, AI and machine learning, and more. Camps are all about high-energy fun, new friends, trusted instructors, and exclusive tech partnerships. Experience ID Tech at 75 college campuses nationwide. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer. ID Tech is more than just the original and most trusted tech camp for kids ages 7 to 17. ID Tech is where kids find their people, the engineering and creating people, the fire-breathing, shell-spinning BattleBots people, the just as happy building games as they are playing them people. ID Tech offers over 50 epic courses like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with take-home bots, and more at 75 college campuses across the country. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
Life is full of choices, but the choice between getting crispy chicken nuggets or a Crunchwrap Slider isn't one you'll have to make. The new Crispy Chicken Crunchwrap Slider at Taco Bell. All white meat chicken nuggets, breaded in tortilla chips, wrapped up, sauce and all, inside a slider-sized Crunchwrap. Choose from creamy chipotle or jalapeno honey mustard. Well, there we go. Life, still full of choices. The new Crispy Chicken Crunchwrap Slider. A brand new classic. Only at Taco Bell. At participating U.S. Taco Bell locations for a limited time and while supplies last.
Hello, I'm Sarah, and welcome to the Whispering Woods After Dark. I've got two possession stories today. They're quite similar, same but different times. Both focused around girls, both focused around religion and being kind of shut away. I'll get straight into them. Are you ready for the first story? Some stories don't begin with a scream or a moment of terror. They begin quietly, with behaviour that is almost unremarkable until it isn't. Today we go to South Africa in the early 1900s, to a remote mission school where the walls were thin, the nights were long, and the world outside felt far away. A place where faith shaped every hour of the day, and where those who lived within its walls believed deeply in the existence of the sacred and the profane. This is the possession case of Cara, Germana, Cele, a case that lived in the diaries of nuns, in the testimonies of priests, and in the fearful memories of girls who slept only a few beds away. To understand what happened to Cara, you first have to understand where it happened. St. Michael's Mission in Natal was an isolated Catholic boarding school for girls. Like many mission stations of the time, it was more than a school. It was a world unto itself. A small cluster of buildings surrounded by miles of land and scrub. Far from towns and roads, positioned deliberately where the church could build a spiritual community, away from outside influence. Life there was structured in a way that modern listeners might find rigid, even suffocating. Bells rang before dawn. Morning prayers began in the dim light of the early sun. Lessons followed in strict sequence. Meals were taken in silence or with recitation. Discipline was constant, quiet, and absolute. For the girls, many of them orphans or from families who sought religious education, the mission was home, safe, predictable and familiar. The nuns who ran the mission believed deeply in spiritual warfare, their worldview shaped by the early 20th century Catholic Church held that the devil acted through subtlety before spectacle. They believed that the forces of darkness rarely introduced themselves with theatrics. Instead, they crept. And so when the first changes appeared in Cara, they did not immediately think of possession, just misbehaviour. Cara was 16 years old in 1906. By all accounts, she had been a quiet, obedient girl. Not remarkable, not troublesome. A child who blended into the background of daily routine. The first signs, as noted in written accounts, were so subtle that even the nuns dismissed them at first. Hesitation in responding to a question, a gaze that lingered a beat too long, a distracted expression during lessons. To an outsider, these would be significant to those who knew her. They were small cracks in a carefully shaped routine. Her classmates were the first to feel something was wrong, though they couldn't quite articulate it. They said later that Cara seemed changed, without being able to say how. The eyes are mentioned again and again. They weren't vacant, nor confused, nor frightened. They were watching, as though waiting for something. It's worth imagining the environment, because everything that followed happened there, inside a building designed for prayer, silence, and stillness. The mission would have been lit mostly by oil lamps. Shadows would stretch long against the walls. At night, the dormitory block was filled with rows of iron-framed beds, each girl tucked under a simple blanket while the wind pressed against the shutters. There were no streets, no passing cars, only the deep quiet of rural land at night, broken occasionally by distant animal calls or the whistle of wind cutting across the mission yard. It's in this quiet isolation that Cara's behaviour became more difficult to ignore. Cara began withdrawing, not in a dramatic teenage rebellion way, just absence, a kind of internal retreat where she seemed present only in her body. She became irritable, sharp with other girls, resistant to instruction. The nuns grew concerned, but even then, they believed it was emotional, not supernatural. But then came the turning point, the one detail that appears consistently in missionary accounts. Cara refused to pray. Not reluctantly, not forgetfully, but actively. During group prayer, her mouth remained closed. During hymns, she stared straight ahead. During chapel services, she visibly stiffened when asked to kneel. One nun recorded in her diary that Cara reacted to the crucifix, as though it caused her pain. Another wrote that she avoided the chapel door entirely, refusing to cross the threshold. Still, no one said possession. Not yet. Because what came next was far more dramatic. Accounts describe a moment, not precisely dated, but consistent across retellings, when Cara spoke in a way she had never spoken before. Witnesses described a deeper tone, a layered effect, as though two voices spoke at once, sudden fluency in languages she had not studied. Now, it's important to acknowledge that some of these claims may have been coloured by expectation, fear, or religious interpretation, but the consistency across written recollections is striking. One nun described Clara answering a question in what sounded like German, a language she had never been taught. Another described the unsettling sensation Clara's voice came from somewhere else. Whatever she said, and those words are rarely recorded, convinced the observers that they were dealing with something they could not explain. From this point on, events intensified rapidly. Clara became violent, not constantly, but in unpredictable bursts. She fought attempts to bring her into prayer. She struck out when presented with holy water. She reportedly clawed at a crucifix when a priest attempted to place it near her. Multiple adults were required to restrain her during episodes. Witnesses described strength that seemed disproportionate for her size. There are also reports, frequently repeated, though harder to substantiate, that she hissed, spat, or spoke about secret sins of those around her. Whether these details are literal or symbolic, they contributed to a mounting sense of fear. The other girls were terrified. They avoided Clara's bed. They spoke about demons. Some refused to sleep in the same room. And still, no one had a complete explanation. This part of the story is controversial, and it's difficult to determine its accuracy with absolute certainty. Some versions say Clara confessed to making a pact, that she had opened herself to a presence. Other versions say this detail was added later, that it was an interpretation rather than a statement. What can be said with certainty is that those around her believe she had invited something in, intentionally or not, and this belief would shape everything that followed. The reported manifestations, the physical symptoms, are some of the most dramatic elements of the case. Descriptions include Clara moving with unnatural agility, contorting her body, growling or snarling, resisting physical restraint, speaking in deep, unfamiliar tones. The most sensational claims involve levitation, that Clara rose from her bed during episodes, sometimes to a height of several feet. These accounts appear in later church documents and missionary retellings. They're impossible to verify beyond written testimony, but their presence in the record shows the intensity with which those present interpreted her behaviour. It reached a point where even the sceptical nuns became afraid to approach her. Eventually, church authorities decided that intervention was necessary. In 1906, priests affiliated with the mission performed an exorcism. Unlike Hollywood portrayals, exorcisms of the time were structured, formal, and heavy with repetition. The ritual involved prayers, scripture, holy water, crucifixes, commands for the entity to leave. Witnesses described Clara as reacting violently, thrashing and resisting, shouting over prayers, mocking the priests, predicting parts of the liturgy before they were spoken, revealing details about those present. Again, these observations come from those who firmly believe in possession, but they remain part of the historical record. Then at some point, perhaps near the end, perhaps quite suddenly, something changed. Clara collapsed, her body relaxed, her breathing calmed. Witnesses believed they had watched something leave her. After the exorcism, Clara's behaviour reportedly returned to normal. She prayed, she spoke clearly. She behaved like the girl the nuns remembered. There is little documentation about her life afterward. Some sources say she left the mission and went on to live quietly. Others offer no details at all. But whatever happened in the years that followed, the events of 1906 remained in the memory of those who lived through it. The diaries, the testimonies, the fear in the retellings. These preserved the case long after Cara herself stepped out of the story. The possession of Cara, Germana, Cele remains one of the most circulated African cases of its kind. Not because it's definitely supernatural, not because it's definitely psychological, but because it sits in the grey zone where belief and experience become murky. A remote setting, a strict religious environment, witnesses who believe deeply in spiritual warfare, a girl whose behaviour defied her previous character, a ritual that seemed to resolve it. It's the combination of those elements and the silence that followed. We may never know what truly happened at St. Michael's Mission, but for those who lived through it, there was no ambiguity. They believed they had seen something dark, something beyond human understanding, something that spoke through a 16-year-old girl, and for a time, refused to let her go. It's really difficult, isn't it, to know what actually happened? Because you've got, in this case, it's a teenager. In the next one, we've got a slightly older young woman. And it's so difficult because I know if I was locked away, I'd be up to mischief. There is no way that I could be bored because I'm just not like that. And I was very mischievous at school. Very mischievous. Spooky, unsettling for so many different reasons, and also you'll find in the next case that it's the same. And I feel kind of uncomfortable and spooked at the same time. Are you ready for the next story? Some stories remain because they were written down carefully. Others survive because they were repeated loudly enough that they could not be ignored. And then there are the stories that sit just behind them, quietly preserved but rarely revisited. We're stepping into another case now, right into the centre of the Loudon possessions, into the margins, into the quieter case that unfolded at almost the same time, in another convent under another priest, one that never drew crowds and never became a spectacle, and never quite settled into a clear explanation. Her name was Madeleine Bavent, a young novice nun in 17th century France, barely 20 years old, living in a world where silence was enforced, obedience was expected, and spiritual authority was absolute. What she left behind is not a clean narrative, it is fragments. Confessions, interrogations, testimony given under pressure, accounts written by others, often with their own motives. But when you place those fragments together, a picture begins to form, not of a spectacle, but of something slower, more personal, and perhaps far more unsettling. To understand Madeleine Bavent, you have to understand the world she entered. 17th century convent life was not simply religious. It was structured and regulated, controlled down to the smallest detail. Days were divided by bells. Prayer was not optional. Speech was limited, sometimes restricted entirely outside of designated times. For many young women, convents were not a calling. They were a destination chosen for them. Madeleine is believed to have entered young, possibly without full consent, as was common at the time. The convent at St. Pierre-sur-Dives in Normandy was not large. It was not particularly wealthy. It was not known for scandal, which in a way makes what followed more difficult to interpret, because there was no expectation of it. Madeleine's own writings, what survives of them, do not begin with dramatic claims. They begin quietly. She describes unease, a sense that something was wrong, though she could not explain why. Then came the nights. She began waking suddenly, unable to move. Aware, completely aware, but paralysed. She described the sensation of something present in the room, not seen clearly, but felt. A pressure in the air and a closeness. A presence that seemed to lean in. These experiences are strikingly similar to what we now recognise as sleep paralysis. But in Madeleine's world, there was no medical framework for that, only a spiritual one. And in that framework, nighttime visitations were not neutral. They were interpreted. Eventually, Madeleine did what she had been taught to do. She confessed. She went to Thomas Boulay, a priest with authority over the convent. A man already described in some records as severe, controlling, and deeply invested in spiritual discipline. When Madeleine described what was happening, Boulay did not dismiss it. He gave it meaning. He told her that such experiences could be signs of spiritual attack. That temptation often came to those who were vulnerable. That the devil sought out those who could be turned. And crucially, that she needed guidance. His guidance. This moment matters. Because once an experience is given a framework, it begins to change shape. After this, Madeleine's experiences did not stop. They intensified. She began to report sudden blackouts, periods of lost time, episodes where her body felt no longer under her control. She described voices, not always external, sometimes internal, whispers that seemed to come from within her own thoughts, but did not feel like her own. There were also accounts recorded by others of behavioural changes, moments where her posture shifted, where her voice altered, where she spoke in ways that felt unfamiliar to those around her. And importantly, they were not always witnessed in isolation. Other nuns reported similar concerns, but not all agreed on what they were seeing. Some believed Madeleine was genuinely afflicted. Others believed something else was happening. This is where the case becomes more complex. Because Father Boulay did not simply observe, he intervened. He began conducting private spiritual sessions with Madeleine, framed as guidance, as protection, as a way to confront whatever was happening to her. But later testimonies suggest that these sessions blurred the boundaries. There are allegations, recorded in historical accounts, that Boulay exercised psychological and possibly physical control over Madeleine under the guise of spiritual authority. This does not invalidate her experiences, but it complicates them. Because now, we are no longer looking at a single factor. We're looking at a young woman in a controlled environment, experiencing distressing physical and psychological episodes, interpreted through a religious framework under the influence of a powerful authority figure. And that combination can reshape reality itself. At some point, Madeleine began to describe her condition in the language available to her. She believed she was being influenced by a demonic entity. In her confessions, she named Beelzebub. This is significant, because once a specific identity is introduced, the experiences become structured. The symptoms begin to align with expectation. Possession in that era had a pattern. Loss of control, speaking in altered voices, knowledge of hidden things, aversion to religious objects. And Madeleine's experiences began to reflect that pattern, whether consciously or unconsciously. Unlike Loudun, there were no crowds, and no public spectacle, no political theatre. Madeleine's exorcisms were conducted privately, repeatedly over time. Accounts describe her reacting strongly during these sessions, at times violently, at times with exhaustion, at times with complete emotional collapse. One priest recorded that she appeared to stop breathing during one session. Another described her speaking words believed to be Latin, though this remains debated, as liturgical repetition could explain partial familiarity. What is consistent is this: the exorcisms did not resolve the situation quickly. They continued, which suggests uncertainty, even among those conducting them. Eventually, attention shifted, not just to Madeleine, but to Boulay. Allegations emerged that his behaviour had been inappropriate, that he had used his position in ways that went beyond spiritual guidance, and that Madeleine's condition may have been influenced or worsened by his involvement. The church intervened. Boulay was removed. Madeleine was relocated. The case did not explode into public scandal. It receded. What happened to Madeleine after this is unclear. Her writings became sparse. Her voice fades. But what remains is a final impression: that the experiences did not simply vanish. They lessened, changed, but did not fully disappear. She wrote of a lingering presence. It wasn't as intense and not as overwhelming, but still there, watching and waiting. This is where the case becomes difficult, because it does not sit neatly in any category. From a psychological perspective, there are clear elements of trauma, suggestion, authority influence, and dissociative experiences. From a historical perspective, convent systems often place young women in highly controlled environments. Power imbalances were significant. Abuse, when it occurred, was often hidden. From a religious perspective, the symptoms align with classical possession narratives. The response followed established exorcism practices. And from a folkloric perspective, this is a familiar pattern. A young woman, isolated, experiencing something she cannot explain, given a framework that transforms those experiences into something supernatural. The Loudun possessions became famous because they were loud, public, political. They drew attention. They demanded it. But Madeleine Bavent's story is different. It is quieter, more contained, more ambiguous, and perhaps because of that, more difficult to dismiss. Because it does not rely on spectacle, it relies on something else. A young woman alone in a structured world, trying to understand what was happening to her, and being given an explanation that may have shaped the experience itself. Whether what she experienced was internal, external, or something in between, is something we cannot fully answer. But what remains is her voice, fragmented, uncertain, and lingering. And sometimes those are the stories that stay with us the longest.
ID Tech is more than just the original and most trusted tech camp for kids ages 7 to 17. ID Tech is where kids find their people. The engineering and creating people. The fire-breathing, shell-spinning BattleBots people. The just as happy building games as they are playing them people. ID Tech offers over 50 epic courses, like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with Take-Home Bots, and more at 75 college campuses across the country. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
So, as I said, very similar sort of cases, apart from this one involved the priest. And obviously, we don't really know what happened there. Wouldn't surprise me if there was some kind of abuse going on. Maybe there was some mental health. Maybe this was then, when the police got involved, a manifestation of what was going on between them and that kind of psychosis that can develop when you truly believe that something is happening to you. I don't know. And I did mention about the loon possessions, and I'll look into that at some point as well and do an episode on them. But I hope you enjoyed both stories, and I will catch you again on Tuesday for the main episode. Take care, everyone. The stories told on the Whispering Woods are inspired by historical records, witness reports, and local folklore. While every effort is made to research and represent events accurately, some details, names, and locations may differ from official accounts or have been changed out of respect for those involved. These episodes are created for storytelling and entertainment purposes and should not be considered definitive fact or investigative journalism.